And hello everyone, welcome back to another Meteor tutorial. In this tutorial, we'll be getting to the fun parts of programming. So we will actually be implementing some posting mechanics. So first of all, I would like to, if we just close everything here, I would like to change the home page to instead be the browse page, because whilst it is still kind of the home page, when you go to something like Twitter or X or any other similar platform, you will notice that if you go to home page, it immediately lets you browse, and so it's the browse page. So here I'm just going to rename it to browse page. Take note, VS Code auto updated it here with the import, and then I also want to just rename this right here to also be browse. And then of course we can just go here and make sure home page is changed over to browse. Alright, and if you want to make sure it works, you just say npm start. Now, one thing yesterday that I noticed we didn't have was a logout button. So let's just, for simplicity's sake, add a logout button so we can easily swap between a login state and a logout state. So here, let's go right inside of config provider, that's fine. And we can specify a button from ant design that just says logout. And all this will do is on click, it will simply just call meteor.logout. And this will log a user out when they are logged in. So if I were to go to /login and I would just say nick@gmail.com and add my password, then here again the text is there, we just can't see it. There's a logout button. If I click it, the text is now back to its original state and we don't have the logout button anymore because it switched us back to this one right here where the user is not logged in. So there is no button and the algorithm is light themed. So let's go to our browse page here. That was the wrong button. Here we go. And we just want to style it a bit because we want to add a view so we can view posts as well as a view so we can style or create posts. So I'm going to call this space, make the direction vertical, and add a style that just specifies the width is 100%. Then we want to be able to allow the user to click a button that says, hey, create a post. So we're going to create a use state, show create post, and here we can just import the use state and make it false. Then if show create post, take note of these brackets here. This is to implement some basic JavaScript into our JSX. Then we want to render something. Otherwise, if it's false, we want to render a button instead. So a button, and this button contains a plus outlined, which comes from ant design, which is just a nice little icon for us. It will have a new post text. And then at some point we want to check if the user is actually logged in so we can say you need to be logged in to post. So let's actually include that right now because it is a good thing to know. So currently we cannot check from here if the user is logged in, or we can check from here if the user is logged in. But why? When we already fetch whether the user is logged in or not from here, why should we fetch if the user is logged in from here as well? Personally, I feel that is not necessary. So if we go to our app.tsx, the first thing I want to do is here where it says basic site props, I want to go user ID, which is possibly a string. You could also go and make it something like this. This is also perfectly fine. However, saying it's string or it's not a string is just as well, but it depends on what you prefer. Now you could skip this part here because the user is not logged in, so we don't have to check here. You can also skip this part here because the user is not logged in, it's loading. And in here is all where you need to go. That's why we're specifying a string here, because we already know it's not going to be null, it's not going to be undefined, but we'll just specify it might not be included just in case, because it's not a required thing that every page needs. Now if we scroll down here, we have our map which renders a route, but the big issue is here we put a route.element inside of these brackets to render it. Now we have an issue because how do we pass in that user ID into this element? Because that's the downside of doing it like this. We cannot just directly pass in the user in here unless we take this and put it inside of our app.tsx, but that will kind of make it a little bit messy. So now we're stuck. What can we do? We can clone this element and then pass in what we need. So we go here and say react.clone element. We specify our route.element, and then we specify the props we want to pass in, which is user ID. And there we go. We can then remove this because this will now render this element as well as pass in the user ID into that element. So we can do the same down here where we just paste it here, but you'll notice we actually get an error. And this is because of a slight mistake on my side. Here we can just go as, instead of React node, we specify it's a React element. There we go. And now the error is gone. Alternatively, if you don't want to say that, you can say as any. I do not recommend using as any though, because that's defeating the purpose of TypeScript, but against all options that could work. And there you go. Now we pass in the user ID, which we fetch here, into all of our routes. That includes the browse route. Now to get the user ID, we just go interface, and I call all my interfaces this, so it's just the page name and then props. And then we extend the basic site props. We don't have to add anything here because the basic site props will automatically include the user ID. So then here we can just go user ID and just make sure that this here includes the browse page props. Now we have our user ID, which is of string or undefined, because this page might be rendered even if the user is not logged in. Now here with new post, we can go, if not user ID, then log in to post. So if their user ID is not provided, then they need to log in to post. We can also then disable this button. So disabled if not user ID. We can check that this works because there, new post, login to post. I'm not logged in, so I will need to go to /login, login as Nick, and once I am logged in, there is a new post button I can click and a logout button. Now when they click this button, we want to trigger this show create post. So we go on click, set show create post to true. Now this create post option here, we want to create a component for it. So inside of UI, we're going to create a components folder. Note this is for global components that can pretty much be used anywhere. So on other pages than the browse page, you might want to implement a create post button again. And this will allow you to then call it again. Where components that I put in here would be local components that will only be used inside of the browse page and will not be used anywhere else really. So that is why we have two different component types here. Here we create a new folder called create post and then a new file called index.tsx. Create our React functional component called create post, and there we go. Now here we can just call our create post. And Bob's your uncle, we get our create post here when we click here. Now to design it, it will be pretty simple. So we're going to use a flex. This flex will have a style of width being set to 100%. And this is just regular CSS, so don't worry too much about the styling. And then the gap will be large. This is just the spacing between elements inside of the flex. Then we have our input, and this will be of type text area, so it will be a big input. We also have a space here, which contains two buttons. The first button will be for the post button, so they can post what they just typed. The second button will be to close it. So we just have a close outlined. Just import all the missing imports. In this button, we just want it to look like a type of text because it's just going to be an icon. So it will look like a piece of text. And then yeah, so this is pretty much the styling we'll be sitting with. So here we go. Just ignore that it looks pretty gross. For right now, I'm just going to change up the styling here to be the default algorithm because the dark algorithm is pretty ugly to start out with, and we're just going to have to tweak it a little bit to make it look better. So here we go. Now again, we want to pass in a couple of things here. First of all, to close it, we want to very much show it or not show it, depending on if it is shown. Note, you don't need to pass in the show value we are going to pass in because we already hide it here. But it's up to you if you want to do the extra effort and do that. So here we go, show, which is of type Boolean. And in set show, and I'm not going to type this out because I, for the life of me, can never remember this. So just hover over your use state here and you'll just copy this part right here. And then you paste it there. Then we bring these two in here. And then cool. Now if you just go if not show, return an empty element. Again, this one is pretty much optional. And in this one right here will be on click, set show to false. And then maybe one more use state just for the post text. And we import that use state. Value is post text and on change is set post text to e.target.value. There we go. Now we just need to make sure to pass in these items here. So we copy that and then we just say show is equal to, and this will be set show. Alright, now if I click the X button, it will disappear. If I click the new post, it will appear again. Next up, we actually want to render the posts that we are trying to display. So to do that, we can go to our components and create a new file or folder rather called postcard. So this will be local because chances are postcards will only really appear inside the browse page depending on how you design your page or your site. And here we just go index.tsx and React functional component postcard. Alright, so here we can create a card and we'll just give it a style of minimum width to be 300. Then in here we can just specify a card.meta to specify any metadata. And for now we'll just specify the description, which will be a space of the direction vertical. And in this will just include, so typography, this is the post text. We'll change that later. And another typography. And this will contain the date at which the post was posted by, as well as the post's username. So the user who created a post, their name. So here we can specify format to human date from my JS utils. And this will just format a date into a human readable one. And we can just specify new date for now by. And we can specify a button that will be of type link because we'll link the user to the person's username. And let's just go Jack for now. So this is a post by Jack. We might also want to include just an avatar. Now this will be like their profile picture or whatnot. And we can specify avatar. And this will be just be the user's username. So let's go. Then in here we can say style, background color. And we can just choose a random thing like hashtag if98AD. That should be hashtag. And we can just say vertical align, middle. Of course, any styling you don't like, you can simply change. So here we can then go size will be large. And then gap will be 4. Okay, now we want to render this postcard. So let's go here and just render this postcard a couple times. Alright, so as you can see, there's the date. You can click on Jack's name. We can't really do anything right now. Here's Jack, a nice little random color we chose. And in here is just the post text that should be displayed. Everything is in a nice card. Now you might also want to like heart it, so to give it like a little bit of a heart symbol, we can maybe go up here, and maybe at the postcard actually. And I'm not going to do this inside of it because you might want to later have like delete buttons and whatnot that is based on if the user is logged in or not. And doing it outside of the return makes the code just a little bit cleaner. So let's go const post actions. This will be an array of elements. So here we can go button of type text with a heart outlined. Then you take this post actions, you go to the card and you say actions and you pass in post actions. Now each one of them has like a little heart you can click. Okay, so I'm going to split this tutorial into multiple parts just to keep them nice and short. This was the styling part. In the next part we're actually going to be implementing these so they actually work. Thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed and I will see you all again in the next Meteor.js tutorial.